question for Kate.
Yeah.
And I apologize that I'm going to go into the semiotics of it all, but I think it's wonderful, how we have kind of various layers of meaning to your work, and the text and the imagery competing for it, primacy as it were, and all the underlying notions of repression, sexuality, and stuff. But have you ever felt that by overtly linking that to the menstrual cycle,
yeah,
you are inadvertently reinforcing this very kind of medieval.
Sorry, reinforcing the theory
of this very medieval notion of, of women being defined by their physiology.
But it's just it's a sort of facet of a part of the work. I think to some extent we are. What was the last thing you said? That women are determined by their physiology?
Yeah, basically.
To some extent, I feel I am. I feel like my menstrual cycle has to be enormous.
Just because you're making a reference, just because you referenced the fact that you wanted to emphasize the fluidity of self, and there's that you kind of felt like there was no coherent self. One may follow from there, to the point where, being a woman, kind of going through the cycle, kind of, denies women psychological coherence.
Well,
which is,
I'm
not subscribing to that.
No. I think actually at that stage in my life, in my 20s, I'm not sure I did have psychological coherence. Someone who I used to work with here, actually, Vince, and he probably vouch for that. I think for some women, obviously, many women do have that, and I think I probably have more, but I think through cycles in our life, there are times where we all go through periods where we don't, which may be to do with the menstrual cycle or some cycles that men go through or whatever, but I think that is definitely a part of some people's experience of life, and for me, I find it reassuring to see work which does actually talk about that. But I certainly wouldn't want it to say that no women have any kind of sort of coherence to their psychology, because that obviously isn't the case. But for me, that was.
It's to do with the value system, isn't it? It's to do with, we can't deny our biology, but it's to do with how we assign values to it. So
yeah,
absolutely.
It's not so much that we're not controlled by our biology, but more how that is interpreted by society. Because clearly there are physically superior physical specimens in the world, some more than others, but women have been assigned a secondary role because of a value system that suggests that their vulnerability or whatever this monthly cycle might be.
That's precisely what I'm driving at. Physiology was used
but maybe
as an
the values are
excuse
starting to change.
Yeah.
I think the sort of subjective aspect of a lot of art in the last 30 years has challenged that. We're probably coming after that. We're probably benefiting from it to some degree.
Now, I don't know if any of you know, or some of you may know, all three of us have been photographed by Neeta, and having been part of that process, it's quite incredible. Very emotional, very exciting, a lot of questions being asked, and I think I've probably asked you this before, but it was such an amazing experience as somebody who looks at photographs every day to be photographed. But were you not tempted to photograph yourself? Because I'd love to see you in one of your portraits. I know you're in the portraits because you created them, but why did you decide not to do so?
I knew very early on, I was very clear-cut about it, it just wasn't appropriate for me to be in this. These works are manifestations of a dialogue, and I really love what you mentioned about detail and craft. I feel like I'm smeared all over these portraits because of the detail, because of the engagement with craft, and there's that I'm manifested through that, and that these are the evolution of a series of conversations with my friends looking at aspects of femininity. So the fact that I feel I'm already there just made it, who will I have a conversation with if it was I'm myself? I already spend enough time in my headspace.
What I was struck with all three of you actually is the amount, the picking up and putting down of the work, whether it be because of funding or because you have other things going on in your lives or whatever. And I wondered how much of that is an advantage as opposed to a disadvantage, because in some ways you might say it's a disadvantage. I don't have the funding, so I can't do it, but maybe there are advantages as well in just putting it away and coming back and putting it away and coming back. What do you think?
I think if you've got a strong idea, it's going to be bugging you, and you just, I mean, this has been haunting me for many years. I mean, I was thinking about, I'd seen Madame Yvonne's work in 1997, and I was dumbstruck, and it's one of the few times I've gone into a space and just been speechless looking at her work, and that, you know, it's been hooked in me ever since. And then when I was working on sustenance in 2002, 2003, I knew that I wanted to work with something. I wanted to excavate my desire, basically, what my relationship was, what my desire was in terms of Madame Yvonne's work, and that. So I was, you know, thinking about things then, and then 2004, I mean, in my naivety, I thought, oh, I could do this in the bedroom. A light bought from eBay. I made a wrap and a hat that made my sister look like she was a womble. And I just thought, hey, I can. And I quickly realised, look at me with the legs, and hysterical. That automatically looking at that, I thought, for these to work, they have to be as good as something a commercial photographer would produce, because they need to hinge on that. And so that dictated there and then that I needed a significant amount of money, and in order to do that, you know, that's how it all comes through. So, and I never work on one thing at a time, because I find there's a danger there of getting too tight and too caught up in something. So I know my work process well enough to know that we're working on several different things at the same time, and not being daunted by the fact that if an idea is going to take years to come through because of, you know, the personal circumstances of refining. If it's a good idea, it you know, it's not going to go away. So in that sense, there is an advantage, because if it's a crap idea, you'll at some point think, what on earth was I thinking that was brilliant for 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's pants. So there is something to be said about having that time aspect to really whittle down and strengthen the concept.
Do you want to say anything about that, Kate?
Just to say, I just think it's really good to constantly have to keep going away and coming back to your work, because every time you come back, you're looking at it freshly. Like if you work on something sort of flat out for hours on end, you just get lost in it. So I think it's probably a really good thing.
I think that there is the danger of the work, of the ideas withering on the vine when you work that way, and I think it suits work which is, all this work is made kind of in pieces or in sequence, and so it starts to determine the way that you make work, and so it's sort of like piecework. In a room of one's own, Virginia Woolf says, she describes all the young novelists that are arriving with the new sort of medium of the novel, all the great women writers, and she says most of what they produce is like fallen apples full of wormholes. I think that is one of the problems of not having proper funding, is that you can have great ideas but then you don't quite get to realise them, and you sort of almost get them there but not quite. I mean, as much as it's nice to go away and to come back and go away from your work, which is healthy, it's also very nice to have proper funding.
Just thinking without funding, I just wanted to make fluoride something that was embarrassing. There is something about the structure of an academic system that kind of dictates where you're supposed to be in terms of maturity and resolution with a body of work, which is artificially defined by the academic year and where you're supposed to be by the end of your first year, your second year, your third year. And I often say to students, work takes as long as it takes. I mean, you know, the kind of pressures, the constraints, access to resources, that all changes once you come out. So I don't think. I try to encourage people to not worry about feeling like they've got to have something resolved in a year's time, or they've got to have a resolved body of work every 2 years, because life's not like that, and every kind of work that one endeavours to do is going to be different. So you know, that's another kind of pitfall to avoid about where you think you should be, and you've got it together by a certain point.
Do you have anything you want to say about that?
I mean, I'm a photographer. I'm just starting really, and I think I think what you just said just now is because I've just left a course at St Martin's, is that you feel like, oh God, you know, you had to do something in such a short amount of time for your final show, the pressure to do something, and then listening to you talk, just think, wow, actually, that's a really artificial kind of deadline that you had to work to in a sort of horrible way, almost, although, you know, it's good to get that work out. So in a way, it's quite good to think about doing things on a longer time scale.
In my assessment series, when I graduated from the Museum School of Boston in 2003, I hadn't finished the series. It was still something I knew needed. So within days of having my thesis show, I was back shooting the work because, you know, I knew where it needed to finish, and it didn't tie in well with a final year thesis deadline.
But you can also feel drained, can't you? If you do things in a really kind of have to do things in a big rush, and I think I've got that drain, but I thought I never want to return to that, and now I'm actually thinking, well, I probably will return to it, I probably will keep doing it, you know, having had that 2 months of not doing it for a while, so, you know.
I think it's about confidence, so just because it's confidence in knowing how you work. I think that's what it informs you and educates you into knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are.